I met Brent in a treatment center. So after you get about 6 months, you can go in and speak to the patients up in detox when they're detoxing. And I'd met Brent the first time. I'd gone in with my sponsor, and it was kind of comical because Brent was sitting there and he looked defeated. He was sitting right on the edge of a couch. He had a Bible in one hand and a green apple in the other one, and he didn't know what was going on because he'd been on a pretty good runner, which I found out later was heroin was his drug of choice, and we sat there and talked for a while, and he ended up asking my sponsor to sponsor him. And when you're in that kind of lineage of sponsor, sponsee, then you got the same sponsors. You become friends because you've got a common denominator, and that is an individual that was helping you go through the steps and and with the recovery program. So anyway, we became friends and just really got close in a lot of different levels. Found out that him and his wife own this facility, Paradise Cove up here, and we just, I don't know, went to a lot of meetings and became really close. Man, just he was happy guy, just a great guy, caring, always gave you the time to talk. Whether it was on the phone or in person, he was always willing, in great health, great shape. I don't know, just somebody I always wanted to hang around with, and get to know better. We were sitting there in the detox center and just talking to him, and I remember looking at him. I'm like, man, which one are you going to choose first, the apple or the Bible? And he just looked at me. He goes, I don't know, man. And it's just and that's where our journey started. And then we became friends and going to meetings and always being at meetings together. We used to have the meetings in Valley Hope inside the cafeteria at the time. And COVID came and it shut everything down. And so I found a gym in South Lake to where we had these meetings in a building right next to a gym. There was a center, but anyway, so we would have meetings during COVID. We would have meetings 7 days a week over there. Brent would come to the meetings, and we'd have a bunch of meetings, and we'd still take meetings into the treatment center, and really trying to give back to anybody that's affected by this COVID, because everybody was shut down. We didn't know what to do, and so the more meetings we could do, the more help we were trying to give people out there, because we knew with COVID, you isolate and do things. And so Brent was involved with that with us and stuff. And then the gym that I was had the meetings at, they had sold their business, or their lease ran out. I can't remember something. And then with COVID, and so Brent called me one day and he goes, "Hey, Tina and I, we have the place Paradise Cove up on Lake Grapevine." I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, Tina and I talked, and we can bring the meetings up here." And so in the center out there, we had meetings up here for a long time. And just up until probably about a month ago, and we took the meetings back to Valley Hope, but Brent was the one that brought us the meetings up here. And so, him bringing those meetings up, allowing us to come in here and have the meetings was really cool, because it allowed us another spot to come in. And, but I think and this is my experience with this. This is my story, that Brent and I had the same sponsor, and both Brent and I had gone through a procedure. So I blew out my back at the gym, and I had to get surgery. And I had called my sponsor and I said, "Hey, I don't want to get back on pain pills, because that was one of my big downfalls to my addiction and stuff. What do I do?" And so then I called another person, Daniel, and then I called Valley Hope and some counselors and said, "What do I do?" And so they suggested I give all my pain meds to somebody and let them control everything. I was like, "Cool, done." I found out later that Brent had broken some ribs at that same time, but he did not call his sponsor. And he took the pills and thought he could manage them on his own. And he found out he could not. And then he relapsed on heroin. And then he got back in, and he kept going back and forth and trying to get back into the program until it was too late. He tried getting back into it. And I remember I think it was a Friday, and I'd called Brent, and he'd been struggling pretty hard. And I talked to him on the phone for about an hour. My sponsor actually called me, and he says, "Dude, can you reach out to Brent?" I was like, "Absolutely." I said, "I just talked to him the other day." And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "Try to get him back into treatment." So I called and I talked to Brent probably for an hour, and we just sat there and talked and had a really good conversation, and he was willing to go back into Valley Hope, because my sponsor and I, we would talk, and we're really worried about him. We were like, man, if he doesn't get some help, something bad's going to happen. And he called Valley Hope, and he was going to go back in there, and then something happened, and he didn't. And I'll never forget this, because it still rings in my head today, that we had an event up here with Tina, and there was probably, I don't know, 150 people up here, and it was about addiction and recovery and everything like that. It was on a Saturday, July 24th, 2021. And I left, and I was gone for about an hour and a half, and Tina, Brent's wife, called me in hysterics, and she says, Brent's gone. Brent's gone. The hardest part about that phone call is when you're in addiction and you had talked about it a week before, it's hard to explain. It's like you expected it but didn't want to believe it and can't believe that it happened at the same time. And she's crying in the phone, and I said, what do you want me to do? And I said, whatever you want me to do, I'll be there. Did you want me to come there? And she goes, yes. And so she sent me the address, and my wife and I, we went over there, went to the house, Brent's house, to where he was at with his dad, and Tina was in there, and it was one of the hardest, weirdest, most surreal moments that I've been into, because you walk into a house, and it was the first time that I'd really 100% realized how powerful this addiction is, because I saw people in the fetal position on the ground bawling their eyes out. I see his dad in complete shock, and then I see his sister and myself, and then I look over and there's a coroner and a police officer and this and that, and medics, and meanwhile, you know that the man that you just talked to a couple days ago is upstairs, deceased in his bedroom from a heroin overdose, fentanyl. It's it's heartbreaking, because you know that if we had the ability to make that one decision to not do it that one time, that he would still be alive, but we don't know what that's going to be like at the time, because we'd done it so many times in the past and it never took our life. But that one time, he made that decision to take it, and he's no longer with us. And I think the most humbling part of that whole day, I don't even want to say this, but I feel like I have to for some reason, is to watch the coroner bring the man out that you just talked to in a black body bag. That, to me, will always be in my mind. And for me, that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the devastation that I looked over and I see his wife, Tina, bawling her eyes out. And then to the left of me, his sister is bawling her eyes out. And I look in the doorway, and his dad's sitting there watching him bring his son out. And it's just the impact that addiction has on the families. It's not just that one individual. It's the spider web that it branches out, and it affects everybody. But us being addicts and alcoholics at the time, we think it's us, that we're the only one that it affects, but it affects everybody around us. And that's the part that's so selfish about the addiction. And I think that's why I want to help so much, is because we don't realize how it affects everybody else. Man, I don't know if there's really ever a certain lesson that people can learn from addiction, because the thing I've learned is, until you're absolutely ready to be done with drugs and alcohol, you're not going to change. I mean, until you get the point of, you never want to do it again, or you've just had enough. Because I did that for about 8, 9, 10 years, where I was like, I would be done with it. I'm never drinking or drugging again. And then a week later, I'd forget. I'd be like, fuck, it wasn't that bad. And I'd have a drink and this and that, whatever. And then it was back to my old ways. And, I could go 8, 9 months, whatever, and be okay. But then it would always get worse again. And it got worse and it got worse. And to where it just, and that's, I guess the only advice I can get is get done before it's too late. I remember when I was in treatment, I sat there and because I didn't know what was wrong with me for a long time, I always thought I was crazy, and I'd hear voices in my head and stuff. But come to find out, it's a God conscience, a Holy Spirit. I'm not religious or anything like that, but that we all have this inner voice inside that will tell us the right and the wrong thing to do. A God conscience. And when somebody explained that to me, it was like the most profound thing I'd ever heard in my life. I was like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. And as what it enabled me is I found out that there was a solution to my problems, and it wasn't the drugs and alcohol. It was my own thinking. I mean, I'm a idiot, I mean, that's just where it boiled down for myself, to where I didn't listen. I didn't pay attention to what other people were telling me that was wrong with me, and until I was ready, and that's the hardest thing with addiction is we will battle this shit until the bitter end, until, it's either too late or we do get help. And I think that's why I just want to pass on the word and just help as much as I can with this, because I know how much it's done for me, being able to actually start to become the person that I want to. And it breaks my heart with Brent, because he was such a good man. I mean, he was always giving and willing and stuff like that. But, if I don't know, if you're just not ready, you're not ready, is I guess what comes down to it. And it's just, it's, addiction's a bitch. Addiction is not what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside. And that's where it really breaks you down, because addicts are really good at hiding our inner demons and what we're really thinking about. We'll tell you one thing and be thinking the other thing. And that's where the that's where the biggest thing that helped me in my recovery is being honest with myself. Because if you can't get honest with yourself, then you're defeating the whole purpose, because we're really good at throwing a front out there and showing everybody that we're doing good, we're feeling good, and then deep down inside we just want to die, and that's what's so scary about this addiction, is we won't tell you exactly how we're feeling until sometimes it's too late.